I'm calling today's session, Is Your Creed in the Bible? And the little note about NRSV always means, unless otherwise indicated, that our quotations are out of the NRSV. So there you go. So we're going to start with this question, and that is, how many are God? Now that's a very strange question when you think about it. How many God is? How many are God? How many? That's an odd question, but we have all these different views going on. We have folks who are Trinitarian by their own description. And they're saying, there are three who are God. Three what? Well, yeah, that's kind of the problem. We don't know what. Maybe we'll say they're persons, but they're not persons. And then we'll say can we at least say there are three individuals who are God? Maybe we can settle on that. Benitarianism, interestingly enough, not nearly as well known, but still it's there. And that's the idea that there are two who are God. Usually, these are folks who've kind of seen the light, that God's Spirit isn't really some separate individual from God himself. It's him in operation. It's him working. But Benitarians then still see, but there's still two who are God. God and then his Messiah, the Jesus. That's, to me, strange too. Oneness, now this is interesting. Some of us have come from this background, modalism sometimes, as it is referred to. But the modalists say, there's only one God, but Jesus is God, so he must be the only one who is God. So that reasoning brings us to another whole understanding. There is one who is God, and Jesus must be him. That's the idea. So that's rather confusing, don't you think? If I really thought that was really a good idea, I would have stayed with that. But I think there's a better approach to all this. So I have now progressed in life to where that after thinking about Trinitarianism, considering Benitarianism, and having been oneness, a very devout oneness fellow, I think, I now believe that one individual is God, one individual is God, one person is God, however you want to say it, and that one is the Father of Jesus, not Jesus for goodness sakes, but the Father of Jesus. So here's my question today. We're talking about creeds, and we're asking, is your creed in the Bible? We'll talk about that. But the creed we're talking about particularly is creed about God. And how many are he? How many is they? We don't know what we're talking about here for sure, but okay. We want to take it this morning a little bit from the standpoint of what I'm calling the Jewish question. In other words, in what we just described, Trinitarianism, Benitarianism, oneness, modalism, or the idea that God is just one individual, the Father, what about the Jews? And you might say, well, who cares what the Jews think? Who cares what they say? Well, interestingly enough, we're talking here not just about necessarily just Jews in our communities today. We're talking about biblical Jews. I mean Jews in the Bible. How's that? We're talking about people like Moses. How about David? How about all those people? And yes, imagine this, Jesus. So we're talking about Jews in the Bible. What did they think about this business of how many God is, or whatever? And we should be thinking about all of this, because I think when we consider it, the Jews were actually believing in God first. They were believing in God before us Gentiles got there, pretty much. What do you think? And so how many did they believe that God is? And so this is important, I think. So what is a creed? You can define it in different ways. I think we would say this. It is something that relates to a confession, religious confession, a statement of shared beliefs of a religious community in the form of a fixed formula summarizing core tenets. Wow. So it's something we want, religiously speaking, to be solidly impressed on our minds, we think. And so we really want to make a pretty big deal out of it so that everybody, if you don't get anything else, you get this creed business, right? So, and one of the most widely used creeds in Christianity is the Nicene Creed, first formulated in AD 325 at the First Council of Nicaea, and there were revisions, we think. So what do you think? It didn't really start out in its final form, but they kept working on it. But anyway, so that's a creed. So when I asked the question in the beginning, is your creed in the Bible? That's kind of what we're talking about, creeds. Creeds are out there. They exist. There's a number of creeds that are commonly used in the Christian world. And so we're going to look at that, but we're really going to take a little time and look instead mostly at what I'm going to call the first creed. The first creed about God as it concerns us. And what we're going to say is it is a Jewish biblical creed. That's interesting. So the Jews actually had something we would properly call a creed. If a creed is something to be thought about a lot, recited often so that everybody gets it, then we would say this was a creed, and it's a biblical and Jewish creed. So that's an interesting thing. So that creed then we find in Deuteronomy 6 and verse 4 and following. Actually, I guess it carries on. But the creed says this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord, we would say Yahweh. Perhaps our Jewish friends today would say Adonai, perhaps. But anyway, the Lord, Yahweh, is our God. Yahweh alone. Wow. So this is very, very sharp, I think, very strong in saying that Yahweh's God. And He's the only one who is. Yahweh alone. That's very, very interesting then, don't you think? Okay. So now that creed, interestingly enough, is in the Bible. And so we know by its station in the Bible and how it was honored in the Bible that it's a true creed. If we believe the Bible at all, we believe this then. This had to be correct. This had to be right. And still is. Being as God does not change or morph into something different than Himself. He is what He is and always will be. So we know that whatever He was there, He is still now. And always will be. You know. So was, is, and is to come, always. So in verse 5 in this creed, we're moving forward where, you know, hear, O Israel, Yahweh is our God, Yahweh alone. But in verse 5, it goes on to say, you shall love Yahweh, your God, with how much of your heart? With all your heart. I mean, obviously, by context, we know that that doesn't mean you can't have heart to love your wife, your husband, your friend, your neighbor, your brother and sister in the Lord. There's love in that regard. But when it comes to the God department, you love Yahweh alone with all of your heart, mind, soul, strength, all those sorts of things. But here's how we know, too, what a great creed this is, because now we have directives here about recite these words. That's what he's really talking about, the words I've spoken to you today. Recite those words to your children. Wow. And talk about them when you are at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you rise. How's that? This is really going to quite some extent to say, get this. If you don't know anything else, know this. Okay. And it's all about God and who He is. Wow. Okay. Verse 8, bind them, these words that He's speaking to them. By the way, who's speaking? Moses, right? Yeah, pretty good guy. I think we can put a lot of confidence in Moses and things he's saying about God. Bind them as a sign on your heart. Fix them as an emblem on your forehead. Wow. So we want these words to be on your heart, which I think is emblematic of really in your heart. And on your forehead would really mean in your mind, I think. And then write them on. This business about Yahweh being your God and Him alone. Write that on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. Oh, for goodness sakes. Wow. Look how significant, how critical, how important this was to God's people. And this is just a tremendous, wonderful thing. But then I'm asking the question, well, wait a minute. This business that we're reading about and this creed we're talking about here is hardly known among most Christians. I'm not saying no Christians know it, but most Christians know little of it, maybe don't know it at all. They have no idea what's going on there. So it's not really recited in our churches. I've been in one church and another and visiting churches and so on all my life. I've never been in a Christian church when they said, we will now recite the amazing Shema. No. And people wouldn't know what to say, would they? Let us begin. What are you talking about? We have no idea. That's how out of touch, I think, we are with this very important, crucial matter that's supposed to be on people's hearts and in their minds and being recited, and it's on your doorpost. So when you go into your house, you see it. And while you're in your house, you're to speak of this. And it's not just some, harsh thing or something. They're celebrating their God. They're happy about Him. They enjoy speaking about Him and who He is, and that He's their God. What an honor that is to them. But why do Christians not know this? This is strange, isn't it? The word, this is so important to people and Jews on down through time until now, that they've actually given this creed a name. This creed has the name, the Shema, with a definite article, and what we're saying is the Shema, wow, that's actually the first word of the creed, if we can put it that way. Shema in Israel, in Jewish, Hebrew, pardon me, it means what? Listen, yeah. Pay attention to this. That's the thing. It's drawing attention. So it's the first word in the creed. And it basically is a directive. So if someone says it's not a commandment, well, I think it is. The directive is listen to this, which means take it in, absorb it, and then by extension, do it. But anyway, so listen up. Pay attention to this. And Christians today hardly, barely, most likely don't even know it, right? So isn't that a question to you? If we're Christians, I think this would be of interest to us. It would be of concern to us. The Jews over the centuries, however, they have held on to this. Thanks be to God. They consider themselves indeed the keepers, if you will, of this great truth about the one true God. And great. I think that's wonderful. I think they are. They're doing a good job of it. And to this day, you have phylacteries mentioned in the Bible. Tefillah, perhaps. I think it means prayer, because they wear these items. These are physical items that they wear then on their foreheads, perhaps, banded to their foreheads, banded to their left arm. And this is a way of indicating their minds and their hearts, if you will. Okay. And so Jews to this day are wearing these interesting things that are little boxes, and in those boxes, it's amazing that you actually find copies of a number of different things, scriptures and so on, but certainly this, Deuteronomy the 6th chapter and verse 4, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. They got it. I love that. Isn't that amazing? And so I'm not going to say that we need to necessarily adopt the policy of wearing those little boxes. I don't know that they really had to either, but many feel like that's what they want to do, and they've done that traditionally for a long time. But we do need to know the point, don't we, about these words. The Lord is our God. Yahweh is our God. Yahweh alone. I really like that. So Jewish folks down through time have suffered for this truth, for that point. And it is a truth. It is right. And there have been Jews who have been recorded on their deathbeds. Their dying words are those words. Isn't that interesting? And yet Christians today hardly know those words. Most Christians probably don't. Why have we not been taught about that? That's interesting, isn't it? I think. But here's what I think we need to recognize. People might say, well, this is a Jewish thing, so it doesn't interest. No, it's really not just a Jewish thing. It's a Bible thing. And I think that's important. Our churches out here tend to be big on the Ten Commandments. That's interesting. That came out of about the same general part of the Bible there, and actually spoken by the same fellow, right? Deuteronomy 6:4, we said that was from Moses. So were the Ten Commandments. Well, why do you want those Ten Commandments, but you don't want to know what Moses said about God? Isn't that interesting? So I've gone into churches before, and you'll see, the Ten Commandments, sometimes in stained glass. You see the Moses bringing the Ten, and all this. But somehow, and I don't think Moses even used the word Shema when he gave the Ten Commandments. He'd been talking about a lot of other things, and when he got to this in Deuteronomy 6:4, that's when he says Shema. In case anybody was nodding off in the crowd, so to speak, or they weren't certain about what they were doing, this is the time when Moses, and I can hear him raising his voice about that and saying, listen, listen. Wow. I think that's interesting, isn't it? So we want all them Ten Commandments. Oh, we like that. That's nice. Okay. And but it's the same Moses that said this. Wow. And don't misunderstand me. I'm not suggesting we need to try to adopt the Jewish lifestyle, all those things. I don't think that's it. We know from Paul in the New Testament, he says in 1 Corinthians, the 7th chapter, verse 18, if you are called, that means you're coming to Christ, and you're circumcised, don't seek to be uncircumcised. That's interesting. But if you're called and you're uncircumcised, don't seek to be circumcised. I said that right. But anyway, the point is, to be circumcised is what you would do in order to keep the law. And that Paul is telling them, no, don't go that way. And that's another lesson, but I think it's an important one. So I'm not saying that. We can understand who God is, irrespective of the questions about the various Jewish issues that we're talking about in Moses' law. We can know who God is because, as we said, He never, ever, ever changes. Okay. So anyway, my question then to us is, as Christians today, can you say the biblical creed? I pose that question because many Christians in the world can recite some of the post-biblical creeds. We referenced the Nicene in our definition earlier of creed, but some people can recite that creed or come pretty close, and there are other creeds that they can recite, but it's accepted that all of those are post-biblical, even the one that's named the Apostles' Creed. And I think it would be generally agreed the apostles themselves never really wrote that creed. But anyway, it came later. Not a bad creed, by the way. As those creeds go, it's probably the best of the lot. But can you say the biblical creed? Why are we working on all that other, and we can't say this one that the Bible actually told us to say and recite and write on our doorposts, for goodness sakes? I would think we'd go ahead and want to get that right. Do you think? And can you say it in Hebrew? It's an interesting question. So but why is it not recited? Why do Christians not know it? And if you begin talking about this, they're just going to give you puzzled looks most of the time, even though it's in their Bible. You know, the Hebrew Bible, we say as Christians, that's our Bible too, right? So it's in our Bible then. We're here. Why is it that Christians don't know it? Why has it been so de-emphasized? Why has it been so almost hidden? It's not a part of the liturgy I know, that I know of in any of the main churches. So why? Well, I think the answer is this. It conflicts. The real biblical creed conflicts with the post-biblical Christian creeds and their ideas that God is multiple whatevers, multiple individuals of some kind, right? This doesn't seem to say that at all. So I think for Christians, they're thinking, well, that would just leave people thinking there's just one who is God. We can't have that. So we're just not going to do that one, okay? We'll kind of toss that out. And there's been a few valiant efforts by apologists to try to save it and make it Trinitarian. But in the end, I think they only embarrass themselves on that. It doesn't work out at all. So here we are, though. Can we say it? Are we teaching this to our children along the way, by the way, along with other wonderful and amazing things? But I think, hear, O Israel, the Lord, Yahweh, is our God, Yahweh alone. When it comes to the God department, He's it. He's all there is. But let's take a look for just a moment then. We're talking about our Bible, as it were, and we're saying this creed that is actually in the Bible, the Nicene certainly is not. If it had been in the Bible, they wouldn't have to have written it, would they? They wouldn't have had to have developed the Nicene Creed or any of the others. If they had actually been Bible, scriptural, look at it and there it is, then they would never have had to have written it. But this one, we don't have to make up a Shema thing. We don't have to do that. It's actually in the Bible. I like that. I think that, isn't that a better deal, I think? A more comfortable thing for us, I would think, as Christians. So that's why we're saying, and I'm saying, I think God is one individual. I think that's a big deal to the one individual who is God. And it should be a big deal to us if we're following Him. And actually, the creed that Moses gave to the people, beginning with the word Shema, I think, actually, is talking about that one individual. In fact, there's no question at all. So therefore, we're just looking at some other scriptures that come along with those same people and just see what they say. In 2 Samuel 7:22, we find this: "Therefore you are great, Yahweh our God, Yahweh, O Lord God, for there is no one like you." Well, if I'm a Benitarian, I can't really quite say that. Those are all singulars, by the way, as I understand it. So there's no one like you, one individual. And so, but if I'm saying, oh no, wait a minute, that can't be right because there's another one like him. Well, no, there's not. Well, yeah, there's another one who has the same power, same authority, wait a minute, there's no one like him. What do you think? So this scripture says, and there is no God besides you, no one who is God. And according to all that we have heard with our ears, this is what is right, this is true. So therefore you are great, O Lord God, for there is no one like you. Wow. So I don't want to mess this up, do you? Is it healthy for our faith that we're confusing the issues about God? And we're saying that the one who is said in the scriptures to be just one individual, and there's no one like him, we're talking about masculine singulars, right? Stuff like that. So there's nobody like him. In fact, how many thousands, it's hard to even count, how many thousands of singular verbs and pronouns are there in the scriptures that talk about God, both Old and New Testament, by the way? And the answer is, oh my lands, thousands and thousands. My guess is, I've never tried to make the count myself, But somewhere between 10 and 20,000. I found one indication said 20,000. Isn't that amazing? Others estimate otherwise. It's a big task when you start counting the occurrences in the scriptures. The point is, they're there by the thousands. And I want to know that one, the one who alone is God. I want to, if I was going to write something on my doorpost, wouldn't that be it? He, Yahweh, is my God. No one else. He alone. Wow. This is a creed that's in the Bible. I like this one. I like it better than all those others. Not to mention that if you try to understand the others, they give you a headache anyway. No one has understood them, not even the guys that wrote them. So I'd rather stick with something like this. Call me crazy, but I just think what's in the Bible works for me a lot better than this other. So I think that's 2 Kings 19 and verse 15. Hezekiah prayed before the Lord, before Yahweh, and said, O Lord, the God of Israel, who are enthroned above the cherubim, you are God, you are God, you alone. Wow. You alone. Of all the kingdoms of the earth, you have made heaven and earth. That's all singular again, too. Wow. So who made heaven and earth? One guy, according to this. Isn't that interesting? So I just like this whole business, because you can get into all this and you feel very comfortable then in the scriptures, because you're reading about the one you realize then is the only one who is God. Wow. Psalm 83:18. These go on and on, by the way, just showing a few as examples. But Psalm 83:18. Let them know that you alone, singular again, only one person, only one individual is God. You alone, whose name is Yahweh, are the Most High over all the earth. I think if you have one who is the, definite article, Most High over all the earth, that sort of trumps everything then. You can't have another Most High. I don't think it works very well that way. It doesn't work? Okay. So Psalm 83:18. So we're just kind of looking at a few. This one, I like this one a lot. 1 Kings 8:23. He said, O Lord, that is Yahweh, you know by the capitals O-R-N-D, right? We've talked about that. O Lord, God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven above or on earth beneath, keeping covenant and steadfast love for your servants who walk before you. Notice these words, with all their heart. Now that's an interesting thought, because doesn't that kind of harken back to our Shema that was talking about? I mean, that Moses is there just very animated, isn't he? You're going to love the Lord your God. I mean, it doesn't stop with recognizing that he is alone, the Lord your God. It goes on to say, and you're going to love him. You're not going to tolerate him. You're not just going to accept him. You're going to love him. They celebrated the one true God. They celebrated the Shema. Still are. That's great. They have room to gain here something very important, and that is, I'm speaking about the Jews at the moment, and that is they need to get to know Jesus as the Messiah. That's tremendous. And John 14:6 leaves no room for doubt, because Jesus, if we believe him at all, we have to believe this. Jesus said that I am the way, I am the way, the truth, the life, and no man comes to the Father, no one comes to God except by me. He didn't say, I am the Father. He said, he is the way to the Father. God established him, the Messiah, for that very purpose, to bring people to God, right? So, wow. And as Joel Hemphill has said, you know, we never can forget that the goal is to get to the Father. That's the objective here. But that Jesus is the way, the way. So that's tremendous. So, yeah, but in the God department, the Jews are right on. They've got that right. What happened to us Christians? I think we got derailed back there after scriptural times and after Bible times, as it were, and got caught up into all this unfortunate Hellenistic philosophical ways of looking at things. And it just wasn't right. It wasn't good. And if I can say that, those early people got sort of sucked into all of that. And we've still got a headache today in Christianity as a result of that deviation, that getting off track. It's a terrible getting off track, by the way. And that is the reason, I think, in large part, that the Jewish community, or at least they know the Shema, they've got that down pat. They've got it right. But the Jewish community is not going to listen much to Christians, not in very great numbers, because they realize that, well, for goodness sakes, Christians are off right from the get-go, because they're imagining that not only is God God, but Jesus is also God with him. And they know from the kinds of things we're talking about today, you're not going to do that one for them. You're not going to pull that one off for them. It doesn't work. So here you're going to do this, though. I like this. Your servants, your steadfast love toward those who walk before you. I like that. Not just bow before you, but walk before you. Go about their lives before you, and they're doing it with all their heart. I think and that brings to mind then a question that I've asked myself before and was helpful to me along the way. And that is, I think this, back to the Shema for a moment. You shall love the Lord your God, that one whom you've just affirmed in verse 4, that he is the only one who is God. He's the only one who's your God anyway. It's covenantal in that sense. And so, but now you're going to love him with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. Oh, my lands. Isn't that, it's incredible. But my question is then, how can I do that toward this one individual who is God if I'm splitting the honor that I am intending to give him, or should be due him, I'll put it that way, with two other imagined people who also, I think, are God? One of which is really kind of just unfortunate, and that is to decide, well, yeah, God's Spirit, that's another individual. No. Anyway, no, that doesn't work. But if I'm splitting my allegiance, my love, my service between two now, that's confusion. And then if I throw in the Messiah and decide that he is also God in the sense that God is God, now I've got three different ones that I have split my love with, about, and my allegiance to. And if I imagine, oh yeah, well, yeah, and this is really strange, not to us in the Christian world so much, unfortunately. It should be strange. But we were going to say, oh yeah, the Messiah, he was back there helping God create and all that too in the Genesis creation. Oh my lands, for goodness sakes. So now I'm trying to give credit or honor to the Messiah for being the creator in Genesis. This is terribly confusing. And now I'm not giving full credit and honor to the one who really did do the creating. I'm splitting it. The Shema requires me to love this one with all my heart and with all my soul and with all my might. How can I do that while I'm splitting the honor that is due the one with two other persons? One I imagine to be God, and the other one I imagine to be God too in our theological. Well, that's what the post-biblical creeds want people to say and insist that we think. And why do we say those post-biblical creeds over and over again? And why is it people learn to recite those? And you go into church and this is what you're going to, everybody, now we're going to do this particular creed or that particular creed. What about the creed that's in the Bible? We don't tell them that one. We don't really get into that. Why? Because it's in sharp disagreement with what these post-biblical creeds are wanting people to have in their minds. And we wouldn't want to confuse them, thinking that God is really just one person, one individual, one being, if you will, in that sense. One self, as Dr. Tuggy so well says. We don't want them to think that. We want them to think God is three different selves, okay? So we can't do that. We're going to keep your mind on these creeds. So these post-biblical creeds. So if you come from a sort of a creedal background church where creeds are frequently recited, some may have, that's out there, then you may still be able to recite some of those creeds that were post-biblical, not really in the Bible. And but if you're non-creedal, then maybe this is very educational for you in that regard. But I think when you get down to it, why wouldn't we be asking ourselves, why am I quoting all these post-biblical creeds? Why are we saying those by rote? And we don't even know the one that's in the Bible. And by the way, perhaps we'll take this matter up next week and talk about Jesus and the issue of creed. We'll see how that fits into this. But in the meantime, think about, have not Christians violated the requirement of the Shema by dividing their love, honor, and the glory that they give between 2 or 3 different individuals? I think that's a big problem. I do. So back to our original question, how many are God? I said that's really, actually, truthfully, a strange question. But it's the question you have to ask in post-biblical Christianity. But if you're going to live in biblical Christianity, you really don't ever have to ask that. I think, not in any serious way. So Jewish people in the Bible, I think, they recognized, we said we're going to take up the Jewish aspect of this for a moment, but we're not talking about just Jews out here in the world. We're talking about Jews in the Bible, like Moses, for example, and many others. But they were very clear that God is one individual. Wow. And Jewish people to this day, I think they're right on God. As I said before, they need to come to the Messiah, but we who insist that God's multiple individuals actually are placing a great roadblock in front of the Jewish folks because they're not foolish people. They have grown up realizing the Shema. They heard, they've listened. So that's clear. What about us as Christians then? Is your creed in the Bible? Can we say Shema today? Why don't we? Why can't we? In honor to our God. Wow. Okay, thank you. So this is the picture then that we have. There is one who is God. There is one God. Okay, that's important. Yes, critical. But I think sometimes we don't realize the Scriptures are not just saying there's one God. Actually, in 1,000 different ways, and with 10, who knows how many, thousands and thousands of singular personal pronouns and verbs, the Scriptures are saying one individual is God. Only one is God. So we might phrase it this way. One is God. That's great. We should know that. But that's not sufficient yet until we know who the one is. The people in the Bible who held to the Shema, if you will, you could go say, well, hey, there's only one who's God. And they would say, yeah, of course, we know that. But who is it? Who is he? That's the question. He's Yahweh.